you aren't just who you are. You're also something that changes all the time. You're more like a river than like a rock. You're constantly transforming. What's the name of it? The physicist Erwin Schrödinger thought that people were dissipative structures. It's a very interesting idea. So a dissipative structure is a structure that maintains its structural integrity while its elements transform completely. So you know when you let the water out of the sink, you get a whirlpool, right? And the whirlpool is a fairly stable entity, but the water that the whirlpool is made of is constantly changing. That's a dissipative structure. Well, that's what you're like. You maintain your form across time, but your elements are constantly transforming. And people are very, very transformative creatures. You know, we can... Unlike animals, really, because animals are sort of what they are and that's it. I mean, they have some capacity to learn, but not very much. Your typical beaver is acting more or less today like, you know, his great-great-great-great-grandfather was acting 5,000 years ago. There's no real accretion of culture. Whereas with human beings, we transform like mad. I mean, we do that culturally. Things aren't much, there's so many things, for example, that are different now than there were 20 years ago that it's almost impossible to imagine. And then, so we transform on a cultural scale quite rapidly. But we also do that individually. And so one of the things you might say is that the most stable thing there is about the human personality is its capacity to transform. And that's really something that's worth knowing, you know, because one of the things I can tell you about the great myths of mankind, there's lots of them and they have different themes, but one of the most powerful themes is the way you get yourself out of trouble is to transform your personality. Now you think, you kind of do that every time you learn something, right? Because you learn something and you're a little different than you were before. Hopefully different in a significant way, and hopefully different in a way that helps you solve some problems that you couldn't solve before. So you could say that one of the leitmotifs of being human is, well, if I encounter an obstacle, I can just transform and I can figure out some way of getting around it. And that's something that makes us quite remarkable. You know, and one of the things that I could suggest to you, and I think this is one of the largest ideas that exist, especially communicable in this short a time, is that it's much better to identify with your capacity to transform than it is to identify with who you are now. And that can get you out of an awful lot of trouble. I mean, one of the things that characterizes ideologues, for example, or people who are trapped in fixed belief systems, is that they worship who they are now. And that'd be all fine if everything was going 100% for them, but it's seldom the case. And so, unless your life is perfect, and that seems highly improbable, maybe if you were someone else, it would be better. And, you know, that's all you've got, in some sense, because changing the world in some way that's going to make you feel better about it, well, you know, you might be able to do that in some small way, but the probability that you could or should try to do that on a large scale it's pretty low.